Let me get to the chairman of the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee, Hob Bryan. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's just plain good to see you.
It's good to see you, sir. And you add a little levity to it and also some color with the yellow, and I thank you so very much for that. I don't know if the lights are all on the studio. I have to double-check the switch there, but it looks like a couple of lights are off, but we'll double-check. Before we get to the matters of politics, you're from Amory.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things that have been going on. Amory kind of was, Hob, the center of the universe there for a couple of, for a little while with American Idol, of course, and those two gentlemen. And, of course, prior to that was the tornado. Did you have any damage? Because I haven't had you on since that time.
I personally did not, but as you know, there was enormous damage in Amory and Monroe County. There were almost 1,500 homes in Monroe County that were seriously damaged or destroyed by the tornado. That's more homes than every county in the rest of the state put together and multiplied by 3. We had just enormous damage. But the recovery has been just amazing also.
Have you, has most of the debris been cleared out and rebuilding has started?
The short answer is yes. Yeah. The amount of debris is just hard to imagine. If you can picture those big dump truck loads of debris, we've had close to 10,000 of those hauled out of town, and we'll have more than 10,000 by the time it's all over with. One of the things that happened was the water plant was knocked out, again, simply because of the debris. And as you can imagine, I'm not an expert on this, but the part of the water plant that filtered the water and chlorinated it and all of that was knocked out simply because it had so much rubble over it. The water, they couldn't put any more water back into the system, so we lost pressure. And in what was just an amazing situation, within 72 hours, they had gotten all that rubble off the plant, got the plant back to functioning again, had water going back into the tank to create pressure all over the state. They had taken samples. They drove to Jackson and had the samples tested. With 72 hours, we had water back in Amory. And that's just a tribute to the utilities department and the people there and how good they are. As far as the power poles are concerned, we lost more than 1,000 power poles. And as you know, when that happens, people show up from surrounding areas. And again, just extraordinary work on the part of the utility department, the electric department, Amory. The limiting factor fairly quickly was not anything other than the inability to get down the street to put the pole up. And it took about a week or a little bit more before they could get just physically to where they could put the poles back up. But basically, as soon as the streets were clear, somebody was there putting up a pole. So it's just an amazing amount of recovery, and a lot of it due to the folks in town. The high school was damaged. The building itself is brick and concrete, built in the 50s, so it was okay. But it had windows. It had a roof. And it had an auditorium. The auditorium was damaged because the winds were so strong, they bent the superstructure of the auditorium. Wow. So I'm told. And the roof blew off, and among other things, there were small pebbles and all in the roof, which immediately got blown by the tornado into the school buses, which were parked out back. So there they were. I talked to the superintendent at the school in Amory, who woke up in the middle of the night with the tornado and somehow managed to get down to the school in the middle of the night to see what was going on. The schools got back up and going in 2 weeks. They got going before they could operate all their school buses. When they reopened, they had 85% of the students there. So I think that is an extraordinary effort on the part of the folks at the school, the teachers, and then to have that sort of attendance is just an indication of how much support there is for the school. So things are coming back.
Yeah. Are they on that regular school year, or are they on the year-round?
It's a regular
school year. I got to ask you, were you at home when it hit?
No, we were in session.
That's right. You guys were in session.
Down there passing legislation about things such as money for hospitals.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But one other thing here, though, how many businesses were damaged? Because people don't think about this, but it does add to the woes from the city as far as taxes are concerned, and et cetera, et cetera. So, were there a lot of businesses that were damaged?
There were. Main Street itself was not damaged that badly, but just north of Main Street, there's a commercial area, and that was pretty much wiped out. But of course, with a tornado, the south part of town was largely undamaged. So there's a lot of retail that's still going.
Do you know either one of these guys or their families that competed on American Idol?
Yes, they're good people.
That's it? They're good people?
They are. They're good people. They're very talented. I think everybody's proud of them.
Amazing.
It's amazing that we've got so many people from Amory.
What is the water supply in Amory, man? This is the third from Amory. Fred Harmon from that area. So
I keep telling people we've got good folks up there.
Jeez. So, Sam Haskell told me that for some odd reason. I'm not sure why. But I think Sam is from that area, too. So.
He is. He was in school with me.
All right, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the hospitals.
Brothers. Huh?
Let's talk about the hospital situation. You and I had a conversation off the air about this last week, and you looked you looked into it also. For folks who don't know what I'm talking about, the hospitals in the state of Mississippi, and I believe we're up to 9 so far that have left the hospital association. Hospitals across the state continue to face possible closure. State lawmakers recently passed legislation allocating $104 million in money for struggling hospitals. One hospital CEO was on the air with me, and that was CEO Paul Black from the Winston Medical Center in Louisville, and he said that not so fast. House Bill, I think it was 271, and Senate Bill 2372 would not allow the medical center in Louisville to receive any funds due to the hospital already paying for bills induced by COVID-19. In other words, he's saying for any of the hospitals to get this money, there are some things attached to it because of where they came from in the APR funds that says you have to take that money out from COVID losses, and nobody knew that beforehand. So most of them have already filed for their COVID losses, so it's a no-go. So they're still struggling. What have you learned about this?
Well, first of all, this is another result of everything being done in secret and everything being thrown together at the end of the session. And a couple of years ago, the House, because they wanted to abolish the income tax, precluded any of the House members from even discussing the budget or discussing any of these other funds that we have. And I just think that's a mistake. I also think it's a mistake to have all of these discussions in secret. And we'd be much better off if this and everything else was done in public, and we certainly would be better off if we didn't wait to the last minute to do everything.
Yeah. I want you to continue on this one after the break, though, because hold on, we got plenty of time to talk about this. Did you read the bill before you voted on it?
Well, I think everybody has the bills available for them, but as a practical matter, an appropriation bill is just page after page after page of numbers.
Now, well, we'll continue this conversation with Chairman of Senate Public Health and Welfare Committee, District 7. It is Hob Bryan, back with more coming up after this, and then Steve Azar at 8:05. And Hob Bryan, our guest on the air, and I thank him for showing up. Let me read a little bit more of this. The money being offered by the state is through the federally regulated American Rescue Plan, the ARPA, which was $1.9 trillion economic package passed by Congress in 2021 for the sole purpose of helping us get through the pandemic or over the pandemic. And according to Mr. Black from Winston County Hospital, the struggling hospitals like WMC, that's the Winston Medical Center, would benefit from the program, but now they figure that they're not going to be getting any money from that, or if so, it's got to be some changes in there. But you said, let me get back to your comments, Mr. Chairman. You said something about this. One of the reasons this happened is because there was no transparency. And I guess you're relating to the Senate, your chamber, or are you saying the House and the Senate?
There's certainly more transparency in the Senate than in the House, but the conference committees or joint committees of both the House and the Senate, they're supposed to meet in public. That does not happen. You ask if I had read the bill. It's not ever going to be the case that every member of the legislature reads every bill. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, much of which is boilerplate. But as a practical matter, the way you find out what's in a bill is it's discussed in the committee and it's discussed in public, and there are committee members spending time working through the details of the bill. But more importantly, if the conference committees are meeting in public, then everybody has access to the debates of the conference committees. And if the bills stay on the calendar and we don't throw it all together at the last minute, those bills are publicly available, and you have the entire public able to look at bills in addition to legislators.
The best way to do it? I'm just asking you this, just a little pushback here, because if you and I were sitting around a conference table with a bunch of lawyers and we were cutting a contract for something, whether it's a business or whatever it happened to be, and we all put our 2 cents worth in it, it's an open meeting, we're all sharing everything, but wouldn't you want to read the ultimate contract itself?
Well, certainly, that's the point.
Before?
That's the point I'm making.
But you said you don't read the bill. The bill is the contract.
Paul, what I said is there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. It's just like you're reading those little things you click on at the end of the various websites you go to. You don't read any of those things because they're too complicated, and you just don't have time to do that. As a practical matter, what happens is if all of this stuff is made public, which it used to be, and if it is public and everybody in the country can read it, and everybody in the legislature can read it, you find out if there's a gotcha in there.
Are you saying that this was not made public, that these came from a funding source that had some
No, Paul.
catches in it?
What I'm saying over and over again for like the 15th time is if you cram all this stuff together in the session at the very end, so you only have a matter of hours to pass huge amounts of legislation, that's the problem, and that's what needs to stop. And the difficulty with this is only one example of things that are going to continue to happen unless we spread things out and make things public.
Okay. You're and I understand what you're talking about, but as far as getting into the method we do this, I really wanted to concentrate on this particular bill.
Okay.
When you look at it through your expertise, is there a way around there where Winston Medical Center and the other small hospitals will be able to use this as a grant, or do you find problems in this, the way it was written?
Neither I nor anybody that I know of has comprehensive knowledge of all the ARPA regs and all of that. But this is what happened. There was a proposal to spend $100 million to be distributed toward hospitals. Originally, that money was going to come out of state funds. So none of this ARPA issue existed. Toward the end of the session, when all of this was being done in secret, there was a suggestion that perhaps ARPA funds could be used for that. And yes, the expenditures are eligible under ARPA. And so the decision was made somehow, I don't know how, to take this out of ARPA funds. The dilemma is that not every hospital, some do, but not every hospital has eligible expenditures under ARPA. And I'm not sure until the end of the day we'll know what that is. The remedy for this is, first of all, every hospital has a dollar amount that the state authorized. If the hospital can, in compliance with ARPA regs, access that money, and they may be able to spend additional money and get reimbursement, it's a very technical matter, but whatever they can get reimbursed for, they can. What I would do is, after that has run its course and we find out what money hospitals could get reimbursed and what money is not there, in January, whoever is here can simply, from the state funds that we have, send money to the hospitals that were not able to participate. because of ARPA regs, send it from state funds, and we've got plenty of state funds to do that, and repurpose the ARPA funds for water, sewer, things like that.
You're saying we need some flexibility on the bill itself, but can you do that because the letter of the law is written and signed by the governor? Can that flexibility be done without calling a special session or revisiting that bill?
I'm suggesting we comply with the bill as it's written, comply with the ARPA regs. Some hospitals will be able to get some money. We don't know how many hospitals will be able to get how much money, because until they run through their records
according to Mr.
and
Black,
check.
as a majority of the smaller hospitals that are struggling have already, they didn't let the reimbursement funds from COVID dangle out there. They needed those desperately, so most of those have already got that. So it would leave most of the struggling hospitals without being able to partake in that 104.
We don't know exactly what hospitals will be able to access what money. All we can do now is see how much money can be accessed from ARPA funds. Whatever is left over for whatever hospitals cannot access those funds, the remedy I suggest is when the legislature convenes in January, the new legislature appropriates sufficient funds from state funds, which they can do, to make all of the hospitals whole.
How do you think those hospitals that are red line now think about it when they hear you got to wait till January to do that, though?
I think it's a bad situation. I wish it weren't this way. Again, the problem is trying to do all of this at the last minute when no reasonable person can possibly deal with that. I don't want to pick a fight between the Senate and the House, but I think a lot of that is being generated by the House, and I certainly hope things are better in the next 4 years in that regard.
Do you know if does Merit hospitals, Merit medical centers also qualify for this?
I think every hospital in the state qualifies.
I mean, because there's a lot of difference between the amount of money taken in by a big hospital, a medical complex nationwide like Merit, and Winston Medical Center. But they were thrown in with this also for grants?
It's always been the case that in a situation like this, I'll just say that historically there have been endless and continue to be endless ways in which small hospitals receive additional compensation. In most every formula I know, they are skewed to try to help small hospitals. The difficulty is small hospitals are struggling for a variety of reasons.
Does that come under your purview at all from the Public Health and Welfare Committee?
This is an appropriations issue, and so this was all a matter for the Appropriations Committee.
No, I'm talking the welfare of the hospitals is what I'm talking about.
Yes.
How do you interact with your committee with them?
With
the hospitals in the state?
I talk to the people at the Hospital Association all the time. I talk to the hospitals.
What I'm asking is any legislation that comes through, was there any legislation that came through your committee that was directed at the hospitals, or I guess health care itself? What bills came through your committee last session that addressed this in any possible way?
There are a lot of problems. Many of them come about because of the depopulation of rural areas, the small number of people in rural areas. Hospitals are getting squeezed. They're getting squeezed by Medicare, by Medicaid.
There's a cultural change even in the smaller towns like Amory, is what you're saying.
I'm saying there are economic forces making life very difficult for all hospitals.
I'll give you the final thoughts, final words when we come back, uninterrupted. Until you allow me to speak again, I will let you have the entire segment. This ought to be interesting. Back with Hob Bryan coming up next. The fleet happened in Biloxi on Sunday, always something to watch. Long-standing event drew hundreds of people to the Mississippi Sound with the blessings of the fleet, and that happened for the, what would I say, the 94th blessing, the 94th. With the only Hob Bryan, Mississippi Senator, District 7, your final thoughts, sir?
First of all, thank you for having me on. Today, the United States government would send more than $1 million to the state of Mississippi to help provide health care for people, many of whom can't afford health care because they're working at jobs that don't pay enough and they don't get insurance with their jobs. But because we do not wish to expand Medicaid, as we call it, today and every other day for the past 10 years or whatever, we have kept more than $1 million a day out of the state of Mississippi, out of the state's economy. $1 billion a day worth of health care people are not getting, and that's a tragedy. But you said you were going to let me talk, and I see on some very sad news on the crawl, and that is that Kay Cobb passed away. Kay Cobb was my colleague for a while in the state Senate and later became a Supreme Court judge. Senator Cobb and I had very different political views. And nevertheless, I don't think there's anybody that served with with Senator Cobb in the Senate that does not think that she was a hardworking person. She's as honest as the day is long and spoke passionately on behalf of what she tried to do. She was not a villain. She was a friend, even though we had very different political views. And I'm fairly certain she considered me a friend and did not think I was a villain. And it's disturbing that so often we make villains out of people we disagree with about politics. We all do much better if we work together and try to cooperate. And I was sorry to hear about Senator Cobb. After she left the state Senate, she was a member of the state Supreme Court. I thought Senator Cobb was a superb member of the Supreme Court. I read some of her opinions. I thought she was just a very, very good justice. And so I'm sorry to hear that Senator Cobb has passed away. And I sort of also am sorry that we're not still in the era where, although we had different political views, those of us in public life considered each other friends and assumed we were all there to work for the common good. No. And I would say, Paul, I appreciate your letting me come on your show. I appreciate your saying I could just talk for a while. But every time I'm on here, Paul, you let me make the point I'm trying to make, or almost always, and let me have my say. Of course, you seem to have ideas of your own, which you wish to mention on your own show. But I appreciate the opportunity to be on here, and thank you for having me.
I guess I'm getting soft. I'm just getting soft in my old age, is what it is. You go back to the expanding of Medicaid, and here's one thing that, to me, any knowledgeable, concerned, experienced adult who reads a headline that you see on some of the remaining socialist repositories of liberalism in this state, so-called journalist, and the headlines are, numerous studies show how expanding Medicaid will create jobs, grow the state's economy, and provide a boost to Mississippi's beleaguered hospitals. I do not question there is a possibility on the beleaguered hospitals, but in my study of history, and I have no degrees on the wall as a historian, but I know of no government handout program that has ever been able to compete in capitalism with capitalism if it is a government program that not only did not perform or outperform, it always underperforms. And when I hear anybody, especially those who call themselves journalists, tell me that we can use a government handout for an economic development in this state, I run.
Well, Paul, it's just as simple. The United States government will send $1 million every day into the Mississippi economy. Mm-hmm. There's a positive economic effect in Mississippi if we have $1 million a day plus coming into the economy, apart from providing health care for people who can't provide it. I wish we had more time to talk about all this, but one of the problems with health care is it's just not a capitalist system. we can't have a situation, and we're not going to have a situation,
Yeah.
where someone is suffering and dying, has a broken bone, and we're not going to fix that bone because the person doesn't have money to pay for it. We're not going to have that system, and so we can't have a capitalist system.
I refer you to the debt ceiling limit and the numbers that are in there, the trillions of dollars. And if you were right, and a government handout is a great economic boost, shut the freaking factories down and just make it $50 trillion.
Paul, I'm not talking about whether the program is a good idea or not. I'm talking about the absurdity of Mississippi refusing to allow $1 million a day to come into Mississippi.
Bob, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm just trying to give you transparency because that's what you wanted, but it just doesn't work. See you later, sir. Appreciate it.